Constituencies and communication with constituencies are one thing. They're part of what you might call the organizational family. Regulators and accreditors have a role and a responsibility, but they're not technically part of the family. They're viewing what you do with a different lens. How do you balance the kind of communication you want to have with the family, the constituency groups, as opposed to regulators or accreditors?
Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting question. You know, we worked, as soon as the board made its decision, we worked absolutely hand in glove with regulators, state and federal, and all of our accreditors, regional and specialized accreditation bodies. And they became enormously wonderful partners to us. Many of them had never gone through a closure either. And so it was really fortuitous, and I would encourage anyone in my position to do this work as quickly as you are able, to make friends with your regulators and accreditors, because they may not have a lot of guidance for you, actually, depending on where in the country you are located and whether they've had this experience. So we worked very closely with all of those bodies. That gave us a partnership that I think benefited our family, as you call it. But what we see now happening, of course, is that because closures are becoming more frequent across the country, regulators and accrediting bodies are beginning to ask themselves whether they need to change policy to better protect students from abrupt closure in particular. And here's where I hope that the academic community leans in and becomes a productive part of that policy-making conversation. I think it's to our advantage to be part of that conversation. And the one piece that I would offer is that there are some across the country talking about requiring institutions of a certain size or who hit a certain number of distress metrics to have a closure plan on their shelf. And I would say a couple of things about that. One, a closure plan is an enormous undertaking. So if you're asking distressed institutions to find the bandwidth to write a closure plan, that's probably going to be challenging. But on the other hand, I think if all institutions or a broad swath of healthy and distressed institutions engage in this work, it will get easier because norms will be established. And having a closure plan or an off-ramp plan of some kind, whether that's merger and acquisition or closure, could be very instructive earlier in the dialogue with your governing board. To be looking at all of the possibilities earlier in the life cycle of the organization might fuel a very healthy conversation earlier in your trajectory.
Sort of a conversations and principles for navigating a crisis or a closure, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah. Would you all describe some of what you leaned on that helped carry you and give strength to you as you went through this very challenging moment in the life of the institution?
I will say straight up, I could not have gotten through this time without my husband. He was amazing. He'd have dinner ready for me whenever I showed up, in whatever condition I showed up. You know, you get through the day, especially as the CEO, it is your job to set the tone on your campus. It is your job to take the heat, and whether that's coming from the press, whether that's coming from a student group, it is your job to demonstrate grace and calm, and even if that's not what you're feeling at every moment. And so to be able to go home and know that my family, my husband and my children who happened to still be at home, had my back was an incredible gift. And I would say, too, the sisters were enormously helpful to me. I'm Catholic. They would pop in, they'd write a note, they'd send flowers, they'd say a prayer with me, and that was incredibly helpful in a time of tremendous strain.
Chip, how about you?
I would say laughter is such an important ingredient in life. And if you can carve out time for yourself and welcome laughter and adapt to self-care and find cherished moments during the course of a day to kind of reset and do it with purpose, it makes everything better. I think when we fail at that in moments of crisis is when the pressure builds and it becomes too much and we have cracks in the armor, for lack of a better description. But I would say that my workout regimen increased dramatically during this time. I would say that I made a point of going to bed early. I would say I really tried to spend time with my children who are uplifting to me and friends that I found to be uplifting. And I think wrapping that more joyful part of life into this and carving that out a little bit was essential.
Not letting it become all of your life. It just absorb every kind of the black hole, sucking the air out of everything. Yeah, that's so wise. I think that's just got such wisdom in it, and sometimes has failed to be. It's not talked about as much, but it really is a critical kind of.
And it's hard to do, right? I mean, in those moments, it's really hard to do that. But I would say that for me, it just we're all human, and we all can travel that path of kind of self-care in different ways, right? Going for a walk, painting, right? Whatever that might be. And it was fun to actually get to know some of the trustees during the course of this experience and discover that they too had these sort of self-care moments during the closure period where they were carving out sort of interesting things, and we'd start to compare notes about what's working for you. Well, this is working for me. It was kind of an interesting sharing moment there too, which I think brought about some really nice relationships.
It's not unlike, it's on a smaller scale, truthfully, from those soldiers in war that go through a battle and they never forget those people they went through that thing together. Yeah. You've gone through a battle together.
There's some solidarity.
And there's just solidarity that you'll say, well, we went through a tough situation. Yeah, that's an amazing thing.
I think that's really true, because I think it's one of those rare events that if you haven't gone through it, you can't conceive of it. And
can't describe it.
You just can't.
Yeah.
And I think that, just as the chair has described about the board of trustees, that same feature of the relationships within my cabinet was true. I mean, we were family. And I have to say, it's been one of the hardest things since the night I put the keys on my desk and walked out on December 31st of last year, was not seeing that professional family every single day. That was a very abrupt end to a very intense time, and it was a challenging transition to not see them every day and talk about the latest challenge every day and bolster each other.
Yeah.
In a leadership team, somebody's going to be having a bad day, and it's never the same person, and we were always catching one another.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit surreal to walk away
And have that disappear.
and have it disappear.